The silence is the loudest thing in every room I've ever worked in. Not the phones, not the paper, not the voice of the man I've answered to for 14 months without once hearing him say my first name. The silence, the specific, loaded, contractual silence between an employer and an employee who knows too much and says too little and stays too late and is never, not once, acknowledged for the staying. That is the silence I live in. I have furnished it. I have organized it. I have filed it alphabetically and cross-referenced it by date and stored it in the cabinet between professional boundaries, and do not think about the way he rolls his sleeves to his forearms at 11 p.m. when he thinks no one is watching. My name is Noor Khalil. I am 29 years old. I am the executive assistant and financial controller for the legitimate holdings of Dante Moretti, which is a professional way of saying I am the woman who makes certain that the most dangerous man in the city never has to open his own mail, reconcile his own accounts, or remember how he takes his coffee. Black, no sugar. The cup set on his desk at 7:14 a.m. because he arrives at 7:15, and the coffee must be there before him, not with him, not after him, before. My mother taught me that. She was a night shift nurse at Mount Sinai for 22 years, and she said the same thing about patient rooms. The IV bag is changed before the alarm goes off, Noor. Not during, not after, before. Because a patient who never hears the alarm is a patient who trusts you, and trust is the only currency that doesn't depreciate. My mother spoke in medical metaphors. I speak in financial ones. We are both talking about the same thing. Invisible labor done so well that no one knows it happened. At 2:47 a.m. on a Wednesday in November, I fell asleep at the wheel of my car on the Queensborough Bridge approach and hit the median barrier at 31 miles per hour. I was not drunk. I was not distracted. I was exhausted. 21 hours of consciousness, 18 of them at my desk, 3 of them driving home through a city that does not forgive the tired. I had been working late because of the discrepancy. The discrepancy I found 3 weeks ago in the Q3 accounts. The discrepancy I had been auditing alone, in silence, without telling a soul, because the discrepancy led to a name I recognized, and I needed proof, not suspicion, and proof takes time, and time takes hours, and hours take the kind of energy I did not have left. At 2:47 a.m. on the Queensborough Bridge, the airbag broke my phone, the median broke my rib. The paramedics broke nothing. They were gentle, professional, the kind of steady-handed people my mother would have approved of. St. Catherine's ER, at 3 a.m., is a country of fluorescent light and quiet urgency. They set my arm in a sling, bruised collarbone, not fractured, and they stitched the small cut above my eyebrow, and they gave me a phone to call someone. I called the only number I know by heart that is not my mother's. The call lasted 9 seconds. Mr. Moretti? It's Khalil. I'm at St. Catherine's. I'm sorry to bother you. I did not ask him to come. That is not what an assistant does. An assistant informs. An assistant delivers the relevant data, location, condition, time, and allows the recipient to priorities accordingly. I expected voicemail. It was 3 a.m. I expected the call to go to the line he keeps for after-hours administrative matters, the one that records and forwards and is checked at 7:14 a.m. with the coffee. He answered on the second ring. He did not say hello. He did not say my name. He said, "Which hospital?" "St. Catherine's. I'm in the ER. Bay 6. It's not serious. I didn't have another number. My phone broke in the line went dead. I held the borrowed phone against my ear for 3 seconds, listening to the dial tone, the way you listen to a sentence. That has been cut short. Then I set it down, and I lay back on the hospital pillow, and I closed my eyes, and I thought about the Q3 reconciliation, sitting open on my desk at the office. Page 47, flagged with a yellow sticky note, the one that would end Carlo Ferrante's 11-year career. The moment Dante Moretti read it, and I thought, I should not have called. This is a complication. This is a variable I did not account for. And then, the double doors at the end of the corridor pushed open. Before I tell you what happened next, answer this. When a man you've worked beside for 14 months, a man who has never said your first name, never asked how you got home, never once looked at you as anything other than the most efficient machine in his operation, when that man walks into a hospital at 3 a.m. with no coat and no entourage, and sits in the plastic chair beside your bed and does not speak for 6 hours. Do you let that silence stay? Do you let it become the thing it's becoming? Or do you walk away from the most dangerous feeling you've ever had? Because you know that a man like Dante Moretti does not sit in plastic chairs for people he considers employees. Lock it in. I want to know if it changes by the end. Let me tell you how I became the silence in Dante Moretti's operation. 14 months ago, I was a forensic accounting associate at a mid-size firm in Midtown. I had a cubicle with a dying fern and a salary that covered rent, student loans, and one good meal a day if I cooked it myself. I had my mother's work ethic and my father's absence, and an honors degree from Baruch College that no one in the financial world cared about. Because Baruch is not Harvard, and I am not the kind of woman who walks into a room and gets handed things. I am a size 16. I am 5'4". I have my mother's face, the soft jaw, the full cheeks, the eyes that miss nothing and say less. I have been this shape since I was 20. My body is a fact. It is the same fact as my degree and my coffee order and my ability to spot a misaligned margin in a 400-page ledger from across the room. We are not going to discuss it again. The recruiter called it a unique opportunity in private sector financial oversight. What it was, Dante Moretti's previous assistant had quit without notice, the third in a year, and the agency that handled his legitimate staffing was running out of candidates willing to work for a man whose last name appeared in newspaper articles that never mentioned charity. I took the interview. The interview was Dante Moretti sitting behind a desk in a room that smelled like leather and espresso, looking at me for 4 seconds, not at my resume, at me, and saying, "Can you reconcile a 9-figure portfolio without asking questions you don't want answered?" "I can reconcile anything," I said. "The questions are your business. The numbers are mine." He hired me before I left the room. 14 months, 512 days. I have arrived before him every morning and left after him every night. I have balanced his legitimate accounts: commercial real estate, restaurant holdings, import logistics, to the cent. I have scheduled his meetings, screened his calls, managed his correspondence, and anticipated his needs with the systematic precision my mother used to anticipate a patient's vitals, before the alarm, always before. He has never said my first name. He calls me Khalil, or Ms. Khalil, or, when speaking to others about me, my assistant, and the possessive, my, is not affection, it is inventory. I am filed under assets, administrative. I am expensed monthly. I am the most reliable line item in his operating budget. I do not complain about this. My mother worked the night shift for 22 years, and not one of her patients learned her first name either. Invisible labor is not invisible because it is unimportant. It is invisible because it is continuous. It is the IV bag that is changed before the alarm. It is the coffee that is placed before the arrival. It is the spreadsheet that is reconciled before the discrepancy becomes a crisis. It is the woman who takes the stairs because the elevator is slow, and who stays until midnight because the numbers aren't clean, and who notices. 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday, at 11:43 p.m. that $2,143,000 has been routed through an entity called Meridian Consulting LLC, registered in Delaware, with no corresponding service agreement, no invoice trail, and no authorization signature. And who says nothing? Because saying something means being wrong or being right, and both have consequences, and consequences require proof, and proof requires time, and time, at 18 hours a day, for 21 consecutive days, costs more than she has left to give. He arrived in 19 minutes. I know this because the clock on the wall above Bay 4 was the only thing I could look at without my rib protesting, and I had checked it when I set the phone down. 3:03, and I checked it again when the double doors opened and the corridor changed temperature. That is not a metaphor. The corridor physically changed. The nurses moved differently. The man in Bay 2 stopped coughing. The overhead fluorescent in the hallway flickered once, as if the building itself was recalibrating for the presence of someone whose mass and authority exceeded its design specifications. Dante Moretti walked into St. Catherine's emergency room at 3:22 a.m. without a coat, without his men, without the armor of entourage that I had seen him wear to a restaurant opening, a board meeting, and a Tuesday lunch. He was in his shirt, white, no jacket, sleeves still rolled to the forearms from however he'd been spending his midnight, cuffs open, collar undone. His hair was not combed, his jaw was not set in the usual configuration of authority. He looked like a man who had left his building without stopping for any of the things a man like him stops for. He stood in the doorway of Bay 6, and he looked at me. The sling, the bandage, the gown, the bruise flowering across my collarbone, and he did not speak, not for 4 seconds, not for 10, not for the 30 seconds. It took me to realize he was not going to say anything at all. He walked to the plastic chair beside my bed. He sat down. He set his hands on his knees. He looked straight ahead, at the wall beyond my shoulder, and the silence that I had lived in for 14 months, the professional silence, the contractual silence, the silence that meant I am your employer, and you are my assistant, and this is the line, became something else entirely. It became the silence of a man who has just driven 19 minutes through a city at 3 a.m. without stopping for a coat, because the woman who files his contracts is in a hospital bed, and who does not have the vocabulary for what that means, and who is sitting in a plastic chair because it is the only thing he knows how to do that is not commanding, not organizing, not fixing, sitting. That is what Dante Moretti did for 6 hours. He sat. I fell asleep at 3:40. The painkillers and the exhaustion made a joint argument that I lost. I woke at 4:45 to the sound of the monitor beeping and the specific, weighted quiet of a room that is not empty. He was in the same chair, same position, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, head slightly bowed. The posture of a man in a church he does not know the prayers for. "Mr. Moretti," my voice came out scraped. "You don't have to stay." He didn't look up. He didn't move. He didn't answer. "You have meetings at 8. The Castellano contracts need countersigning before." "Khalil." His voice was so low. It was almost subterranean. It vibrated in the monitor. "Stop working." "I'm not working. I'm informing you of your schedule. You are working. You are in a hospital bed with a cracked rib, and you are reciting my morning calendar. That is working." He lifted his head. His gray eyes found mine. And they were not the eyes I saw across the desk every morning, controlled, transactional, cataloging. They were the eyes of a man who has been sitting in a plastic chair for 90 minutes, trying to find the right ledger entry, for I did not know you drove yourself home at 3 a.m., and failing. "How long," he said, "have you been leaving the office after midnight? That's not relevant to." "How long, Khalil?" I pressed my lips together. The rib objected. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He repeated it the way I repeat a number that doesn't balance. Flat, diagnostic. The word held up to the light. You have been working until 3 a.m. for 3 weeks, and I did not notice. You weren't supposed to notice. That's the point. Of what? Of me, Mr. Moretti. That is the point of me. I looked at the ceiling, because looking at him was doing something to my rib that had nothing to do with the fracture. I am the assistant. I am the system that runs without supervision. I am the coffee at 7:14, and the schedule at 7:15, and the reconciliation on your desk before you ask for it. The point is that you don't notice, because noticing means something went wrong, and nothing goes wrong. In my department, the silence came back, but it was different now. It had weight. It had texture. It was the silence of a man who has just been told that the most efficient person in his organization has designed herself to be invisible, and he has honored that design so completely that she nearly killed herself on a bridge at 3 a.m., and he did not know she was driving. Something went wrong, he said, quietly. I hit a median barrier. Before that. Something went wrong. Before that. You do not work 18-hour days for 3 weeks because everything is fine. You found something. He looked at me. In the books. My breath caught. Not from the rib. I did not want to tell him in a hospital. I did not want to tell him at 5:30 in the morning, while I was wearing a gown that tied at the back, and had not brushed my hair in 11 hours. I wanted to tell him in the office, at the desk, with the documentation printed, and tabbed, and bound in the leather binder I use for sensitive materials. Because that is how I deliver information. Prepared, structured, armored in process. But Dante Moretti was sitting 1 foot from my hospital bed, and his grey eyes were doing the thing they do. When he has identified a variable that doesn't balance, and I knew, the way I know when a margin is misaligned from across the room, that he was not going to leave that chair until I gave him the number. Meridian Consulting LLC, I said. Registered in Delaware, 11 months old. It appears as a vendor payable in 4 of your holding companies. Total disbursement across 11 months, $2,143,000. He didn't blink. There is no service agreement, no invoice trail, no counter-signature. The routing goes through 4 layered LLCs before landing in a personal brokerage account at a firm in Greenwich. I paused. The brokerage account belongs to Carlo Ferrante. The silence that followed was not the silence of the hospital, or the silence of the chair, or the silence of 14 months of professional distance. It was the silence of a detonation that has not yet reached the sound barrier. The Q3 reconciliation is on your desk, I said. Page 47. I flagged it 3 weeks ago. I've been auditing the subsidiary accounts every night since then, to confirm. The documentation is complete. It's clean. It will hold. 3 weeks. His voice was barely audible. You found this 3 weeks ago, and you didn't tell me. I needed proof, not suspicion. You needed proof. He stood up. The plastic chair scraped against the floor. He walked to the window. 4 steps. Bay 6 is small, and he stood with his back to me. And his shoulders, those shoulders that fill door frames and make corridors adjust, were rigid. You have been working alone, in silence, for 3 weeks, auditing a betrayal by a man you see every day in my office, a man who sits 3 doors from yours. You have been carrying this, alone. That's my job. He turned. Your job is administrative support. Your job is schedules and correspondence and account reconciliation. Your job is not. He stopped, his jaw clenched. The muscle at the hinge of it worked once, twice, 3 times, like a man grinding a sentence between his teeth. Before releasing it, your job is not protecting me from information I need. Your job is not driving home at 3 a.m., so exhausted that you hit a bridge. Your job is not, Mr. Moretti, cracking your rib because you were too stubborn and too... He stopped again, harder this time. The word he almost said, hung in the room like a number that doesn't belong in the column. To what? I asked. He looked at me, and I saw it. The thing behind the eyes. behind the jaw, behind the 14 months of Khalil and Ms. Khalil and my assistant, the thing he had been filing in the wrong ledger. Since the day I set the first coffee on his desk, at 7:14 a.m., too important, he said, to lose. At 7:14 a.m., a nurse brought a paper cup of coffee into Bay 6. The gentleman asked me to bring this, she said. Black, no sugar. I looked at the cup. I looked at the nurse. I looked at the doorway, where Dante Moretti was standing with his phone in his hand, having just ended a call, his eyes on me. He brought me coffee. At 7:14, before, not during, not after, before. My eyes did the thing I do not allow them to do in professional settings. They stung. I pressed my left hand flat against the mattress, and I breathed, and I held the coffee cup, and I drank it, and it was the exact temperature I serve his, because he had noticed, and noticing is the thing I built my entire professional identity on, and now he was doing it back, and I did not have a ledger for this. The Castellano contracts, I said, because if I did not say something operational, I was going to say something structural. They need countersigning before. I cancelled the morning. He walked into the room. He sat in the chair, the same chair, 6 hours. I called Carlo. My breath stopped. I told him there's a discrepancy in Q3. I told him I'd like him in my office tomorrow at 9. I told him to bring his personal phone. He looked at me. I did not tell him what you found. He will walk into that meeting thinking it is routine, and I will have your documentation, and it will hold, because you made it hold, because that is what you do. You're not going to. I'm going to do exactly what you would have done if you had been at your desk instead of in this bed, Khalil. I am going to let the numbers speak. I am going to sit across from a man I've trusted for 11 years, and I am going to let page 47 dismantle him. Because page 47 is the most precise, most devastating, most quietly lethal piece of work I have ever seen in my career. And you wrote it in a hospital waiting room at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday after working 18 hours. It was a Wednesday, I said. I work late on Wednesdays. The corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. The place where a smile would go on a man who is learning that the architecture of his face has room for expressions he has not previously approved. Noor. I stopped breathing. He said my first name. Not Khalil. Not Ms. Khalil. Not my assistant. Noor. He said it the way he reads a line in a contract that he knows is going to change everything. Slowly. Carefully. With the understanding that once the word is spoken, it cannot be unfiled. When you are discharged, he said, you are not going back to your apartment. You are coming to the estate. There is a guest room. There is a desk. There is a coffee machine. He paused. And there is someone who will make certain you never drive home at 3 a.m. alone again. That's not in my contract. I'm aware. I'm amending it. I moved into the estate the next morning. Temporarily, I told myself. 48 hours. Recovery. Professional proximity to the documentation. I am a forensic accountant. I know when someone is cooking the books. I also know when I am cooking my own. And the entry I was making in the temporary column was destined for reclassification, and I knew it. And I filed the knowledge in the same cabinet, where I keep do not think about his forearms. The guest room had been prepared, not by staff, by him. I knew this because the desk had been angled toward the window, which is how I angle my desk at the office, which I had never told anyone. Which meant he had noticed. The laptop was open to the shared drive. The leather binder was on the desk with the yellow sticky note on page 47, exactly as I had left it, and on the bedside table, at 7:14 a.m., there was a coffee. Black, no sugar. Carlo came at 9. I was not in the room. Dante did not want me in the room, and I did not argue, because the meeting was not about me, it was about page 47, and page 47 could speak for itself. I sat in the guest room with the door open and the corridor between us, and I listened to the silence. the specific silence of a room, where a man is being shown the documentation of his own betrayal in the handwriting of a woman he once called a big girl who moves fast. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. Carlo left the estate with his phone confiscated, his access codes revoked, and his 11-year position dismantled by a yellow sticky note and 47 pages of forensic accounting. No shouting, no threats, no violence, just numbers, just the silence of a man reading the truth in a woman's handwriting, and understanding that the most dangerous weapon in Dante Moretti's arsenal was never his name, his men, or his reputation. It was his assistant. It was always his assistant. That evening, I found him in the kitchen, not the formal kitchen, the one with the tile his mother chose, and the espresso machine that nobody uses correctly except me. He was standing at the counter with a coffee cup he had made himself. Badly. Too much water, the crema non-existent, and he was looking at it with the expression of a man who has just realized he does not know how to make coffee, because a woman has been making it for him for 14 months, and he never watched her hands. "You're making your own coffee," I said. "I'm attempting to make my own coffee. The results are suboptimal. The grind is too coarse, and you're using the wrong portafilter. There are different portafilters? There are 3. You use the double, medium grind, 18 grams, 28-second pull. I can show you." "No." He set the cup down. "I don't want to learn how to make my own coffee." "Why not?" "Because you make it at 7:14, every morning, before I arrive. And that," he looked at me, "that is the part of my day that I did not know I was counting, until I sat in a hospital chair for 6 hours. And realized that every morning for 14 months, the first thing I've seen is not the coffee. It's the fact that you were already there, that you had already arrived, that you had already—" He stopped. The sentence was too long for him. Dante Moretti's sentences are contracts, short, binding, designed to close. "Anticipated," I finished. "Yes, that's the job. It's not the job, Noor." He said my name again, slowly. The second time was steadier. The architecture was holding. "The job is the ledger. The job is the schedule. The job is the reconciliation. What you do. The coffee. The stairs. The midnight hours. The way you knew the portafilter and the grind and the pull before I ever asked. That is not a job. That is—" He ran out of financial metaphors. I watched it happen. The man who speaks in contracts and margins and bottom lines stood in his own kitchen and ran out of words, because the thing he was trying to say does not fit in a spreadsheet. "My mother used to say," I said, "that the best nurses are invisible. You never hear the IV alarm, because they change the bag before it goes off. You never see the chart update, because they write it before the doctor asks. The patient doesn't know her name. The patient just knows. They feel that someone was there, all night, every night, before." "I'm not invisible," I said. "Not anymore. You said my name. I should have said it 14 months ago. Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, because saying it would have meant you were on the ledger, not under assets, administrative, under— He stopped. "Under something I don't have a column for. Make one." He looked at me. "You're the boss, Mr. Moretti. You can add a column." "Dante." "Excuse me?" "My name, you've been calling me Mr. Moretti for 14 months. My name is Dante." He picked up my coffee, the good one, the one I'd made, and he drank from it. My cup, deliberately. "And I'm adding the column. I'm not going to tell you what the new column is called. That is a story for another day, and you are going to have to come back for it. But I will tell you this. It is 7:14 a.m., and there are 2 coffees on the desk. Both black, both no sugar. One I made, one he made. His is getting better. The crema is not there yet, but the grind is right. And the pull is close. And I told him so this morning. And he said, I had a good teacher. And I said, you had a good assistant. And he said, I have an essential one. And the silence. The silence I lived in for 14 months. The silence I built my career on. The silence that nearly killed me on a bridge at 3 a.m. was not silence anymore. It was the sound of two people who had stopped pretending. The numbers don't mean something. If you are the woman who arrives before the alarm, the woman who changes the IV bag, who sets the coffee, who finds the discrepancy, and stays until midnight fixing it, while no one watches. I made this for you. Hit subscribe. Share this with the woman who has been invisible for too long. And tell me, did you pick stay or walk away? Because my mother would have picked stay. She would have sat in that plastic chair right beside him. And she would have changed the bag before the alarm. And she would have said, "I've been here the whole time. You just weren't looking." New story every week. Hit the bell. And if you want to know what Dante Moretti wrote in the new column, you'll have to come back for that.